Have you ever watched a conversation between two people and thought, this really feels like a social media comment section? Well, that kind of happened. Let's talk about it. What is happening, people of the interwebs? It's the Jesus and Coffee Show, and I'm Todd Frazier, your host, as always. And we're back with another episode. Hopefully, this finds you well. Now, things are heating up politically. If you're not aware, I'm not sure. Again, you're probably not watching this because you don't have internet. But if you haven't been paying attention, with the election coming up, it's getting very heated. And just last night, I don't know when you're watching or listening to this, but just last night, the first presidential debate of 2020 happened. And if you watched it or watched any portion of it, you may feel a little bit like I felt about it. And I watched it with Tammy and with the kids, or at least some of it. And there was just this feeling of, I don't care which side you're on. I don't care if you're a Biden person or if you're a Trump person. It just didn't seem like adults having conversation. It literally felt, somebody tweeted this out during the debate, it literally felt like watching a comment string in social media. It was just like talking over each other. It was making a point, calling a few names. It never got anywhere. And it was, kind of pointless in a lot of ways, in the way that I took it. I think there's a lot to learn from how they both went about things, but it really felt like reading through some of those comments. I don't know if you've ever been into those social media conversations where somebody has a point and they're not going to let it go, even if they don't have anything to back it up. And the other side is just as bad, poking and poking and poking. And really the only purpose of the conversation is to point out that the other person is wrong or agitate them to the point of them lashing out, them getting angry. And that really feels like a lot of the conversation on social media. That's the whole purpose of it sometimes. And I know I've got friends, and I've been known to, poke the bear a time or two, but I've got friends that will go on there. I want to find somebody and just pick a fight. I'm just going to pick a fight. And something that actually just also happened here in Yorba Linda last weekend was there was a protest. There was a Black Lives Matter protest that was organized to happen in Yorba Linda this last weekend. And the thing about this protest was it was organized by members of Antifa, or Antifa, however you want to call it. And if you're not aware, Antifa is a group. It stands for anti-fascist. But there is typically what goes along with an Antifa organization is some sort of violence on some level. So the residents of Yorba Linda, where I live, they were ready to stand up to them. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but the one thing I was concerned about was somebody's going to show up and they're going to have a big Trump flag and a big American flag, and they're going to show up to poke the bear. They're going to show up to pick a fight. Now, the people that were showing up on the Antifa side, they were showing up to pick a fight. That's what they've been doing across the country. They're showing up to pick a fight. The whole purpose of this protest was not to protest injustice. It seems like to me. It wasn't to have a conversation about, well, these are the things that we feel like need to be addressed, so let's talk about them, and we want to be out here and we want to show support for these things that need to change. What it was one side coming out to say, we're going to show up, that were bussed in. They weren't from here. That's another thing about it. And the other side's like, well, we're going to show up too. What are you going to do about it? And the whole purpose for the most of these people, I feel like, was to just go pick a fight. They're frustrated about something. They're angry with something. They just want to go pick a fight. And that's what happens a lot of times in social media. And now it's starting to come out and be in person, like in reality. And that's a little bit of what I feel like happened at the debates last night. And there's this need to speak, this need to speak over, this need to put other people in their place. And there's not a whole lot of listening. I don't care which side you're on. Again, on any of these issues, there's not a whole lot of listening. there's not a whole lot of people willing to say, you know what do you feel about that? What's your experience? What is the data that you have to show that these things actually are a bigger problem as opposed to a specific problem for you? Like, let's talk about this, because as Christians, we should stand for justice. As Christians, we should stand for the other people. We should have a desire to help others, to make a difference in this world for Christ. That's what we should be doing. And I don't think, or at least I've not experienced, standing up for justice, going to a person or a group of people and just talking at them, yelling at them, whatever you want to call it, with no point in a conversation where I'm ready to say, you know what do you have to say about that? You have a different perspective. You have a different experience. I'd like to hear what you have to say. That's the biggest thing I feel like is missing. And especially last night, I didn't hear a whole lot of listening from either President Trump or Vice President Biden. I didn't hear a whole lot of, oh, well, let's hear what you have to say about that and let's have a conversation. Now, most things weren't presented on either side in a conversational way. It was lots of grand statements and generalizations that didn't have any basis necessarily in detailed fact or something that they could actually have a discussion about. It was just platitudes. And if you watched it, you know what I'm talking about. But the thing that I find in Scripture, when we go to Scripture, because this is the place where we always need to go to when we need answers or we need help or we're just not sure what to do, we need to go to Scripture. And the thing that came to mind for me was a passage in James. Now, James is a book in the Bible that's actually written not by James the Apostle. A lot of scholars believe it was actually James, Jesus's brother. And based on the way that Jesus's lineage is laid out in Matthew, they think that James was his oldest brother. So, or was the oldest sibling besides Jesus. So in this, it's James, Jesus's brother, talking to the 12 tribes of Israel. So he's talking to Christians, but he's talking to Jewish Christians. And what he's doing here is he's coming out and talking about the actions of the Christian. There's a famous line in here that faith without works is dead. And a lot of people use that to say, well, you have to have works, therefore works to be a Christian. That's not what it's saying. It's saying first faith, then works. And it comes back to what we talked about last time, the natural outflow. What is the natural outflow? What is your instinctual reaction to things? Does it line up with the Bible and what Jesus says? Or is it some internal personal feeling or desire or anger or whatever that's not based or found or has the foundation in Scripture? And the section in James is actually in chapter 1. It starts in verse 19. I just want to read through this, and it's quite a few verses. It's not that many verses. It's 19 to 26. And I want to read through this and just listen to this and see how this correlates to what we're experiencing on social media, what we're experiencing in these protests and or riots, whichever one breaks out, and also in your experiences with other people and your conversations with friends and family, and specifically in times when you disagree about something. I want to read this. You might know what verse I'm talking about here, but I'm going to read this starting in verse 19. So James 1, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Wow. So that's a lot. That's a lot. But that is an extremely strong foundational statement about how we're supposed to be as Christians, especially when we're in a situation when we have a disagreement, when we have something where we need to make a stand. At the end of that section in verse 27, at the second half, it says, well, the full verse, it says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Standing up for orphans and widows. Standing up for injustice. Being a difference maker in those who can't make difference for themselves. Living out your faith. Doing, not just listening. And the biggest thing it says here was at the start of this, which is the verse that came to mind. And before I read through the rest of these passages, I didn't realize how much this entire section is so relevant with what we're dealing with right now. But it's verse 19. It's, my dear brother and sister, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen. That's rarely the first thing that we do. It's rarely first for us to say, let me listen to this person. The first thing is, here's my point. I'm going to tell you why it's right. Here's what I have to say. I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. And in the scenario, in the debates last night, it was way less about listening to what the other person says as opposed to getting ready for their response. Have you ever experienced someone like that where every time you have a conversation, whenever you're talking, it feels like they're just getting ready for their next point. They're not actually listening to you. And a lot of times they respond and it doesn't even actually match up with what you said or what you were talking about. It's like totally out of left field. And you're like, yeah. That's nice what you're saying. But here's what I have to say. And it's totally different. They weren't even listening. They were just preparing in their mind what they were going to say. And that's not how healthy conversation happens. That's not how we can get past differences, because you guys, we're not going to agree with everyone. That's not possible. We're all going to have issues. We're all going to have problems. And we're not going to be able to see eye to eye with everyone. That's just not possible. So when we have those situations, when we have disagreements, when we have something where someone says something and it enrages us, or it's a trigger word or phrase that makes us think, well, if you said this, then you believe this, therefore you're that person. And then you start labeling them. We got to stop that. Listen to what they mean. A lot of times, if we just listen and let someone define a term or a phrase that they use, that for me, if you say BLM, Black Lives Matter, I believe Black lives do matter 100%. But the organization BLM Inc. has a really twisted purpose, if you've read or paid attention to any of their stuff, that does not align with what I feel like is important to make Black Lives Matter. Because the phrase, I have nothing wrong with it. However, it's been hijacked. It's been hijacked by groups that have other agendas. They're not listening to what is the problem. And the conversation needs to be had. What is the problem? How can we help? And as Christians, we need to be open to listening. Now, sometimes we show up to listen and the other person isn't willing to listen either. But that doesn't mean we don't listen. That doesn't mean that we follow what James 1:19 says. Be quick to listen, be slow to speak, and slow to get angry. What's the natural outflow? What's coming out of you when someone comes to you with a disagreement? When someone comes to you and they don't necessarily line up with what you believe or with what you feel is the problem? Do you just talk over them or prepare your response to the comments that they're making or they're not making and you think they're making? Be slow to listen. In James, it's talking all about living out your faith. Faith without works is dead, it says in James 2, which is true, because if you're a Christian and if you have an actual true faith inside of you, the fruit that should start coming out of you, the natural outflow should be something that says, hey, something's different on the inside of that person. Something looks different. When Tammy and I were early married, we were in college and we were in Missouri. and we worked at a steakhouse. Now, I played sports and I got a football scholarship, so I was there in the midst of very worldly people as a Christian. And when you've been involved in sports and gone to parties and things like I had been to in the past and never really participated in the stuff that most people are participating in, I never drank, I never smoked, I never did any drugs or anything like that. But I still am there and I'm a part of the thing. It opens people up to ask questions. And Tammy and I were both working at a steakhouse in Missouri, and we were married and we had fun and we really enjoyed people. And we often listened to what people had to say to us. And sometimes there are things that people would say to us that were contradictory to what we believed. Actually, a lot of times. But there was this one scenario when we were just at work, minding our own business, doing the thing. And one of our friends came up to me in the middle of a shift, and he's just like, you know what, there's just something different about you. I don't know what it is, but something, the way that you treat people, the way that you act with your wife. I mean, they're seeing us interact together as a married couple at the age of 23 and 22 in halfway across the country from our home. They're seeing something that's different. I'm not tooting our horn. I'm just saying this is what happened. We're not perfect. We make mistakes all the time. However, we did something, I don't know even what it was, to have this guy come up to me and say, what's different about you? What do you believe? I know you're a Christian, but I'm sensing something different. And that opened up a dialogue to have a conversation, to talk about things that probably wouldn't have happened if we had, one, come out and just told them that they were doing things that was against what we believed, or two, not just listened and created a relationship. How many times do you just listen first? You got to listen first, and that's how we can start to make an impact for people with the gospel and with our lives that are lived out as Christians. We need to live in this oversaturated, extremely just divisive, angry culture, especially on social media, with listening. Be slow to speak. Be quick to listen. Be slow to be angry. And don't just listen to these things like it says over here in verse 22, where it says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. We've got it right here. We have it in Scripture. We have Jesus' words in the Gospels. We've got James, Jesus' brother, talking to us about here in James. And we've got the Apostle Paul. We've got Peter. We've got all kinds of resources here that we can say, what is it we're supposed to do? How should we respond? And then at the end of the day, pray, reach out, and ask God to help, because that's what he's there for. He's there for us. He wants to have a relationship with you, and he wants to impact people through you as much as possible. So can we do that? Can we be quick to listen? And next time you're in a situation, whether it's in a comment thread on social media or you're with someone in person, instead of thinking of what you're going to say next, really listen. Something that I find helps is just asking questions. Listen to what they say and then ask a question that gets even further in that conversation. And the best question is why? Why do you feel this way? Why is this the thing that you said? And that goes a long way for creating trust and an open dialogue that down the road might open you up to be able to share the gospel in a scenario you didn't think was possible earlier. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. It's right here. It's right here. Don't just talk about it, be about it, right? Walk the walk. Don't just talk the talk. We could go with all kinds of weird, crazy stuff. Be quick to listen. Now I'm going to stop talking because I'm talking and I'm not listening. Of course, I can't hear you. There's nothing to listen to. But thank you for being here. Make sure to subscribe, share this out. We've got a lot of stuff coming. I just had an interview that's going to be posted soon with Pastor Chris Ward. We've got an interview with Dr. Sean McDowell, who is a apologetics professor at Biola University and Talbot Theology School. It's a fantastic interview. He's got books. Chris has got a lot of insight in his stuff. I'm really excited about what we've got going on, and we've got a new app coming out. So go to JesusandCoffeePodcast.com and you can get more information there. Make sure to sign up for updates because We want to talk about Jesus, drink coffee, and listen to what other people have to say. Thanks for being here. Drink up and be blessed.